Hey there. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you steps that you need to follow to get a very good Afrobeat drum mix. Now, this tutorial is split into chapters down below where you can click to watch a part that you feel is most important to you. But I do recommend you watch through the whole thing because there are some very useful tips that you may or may not know that could surely help you. If you're new to this channel, hit the subscribe button. I'm Sir Classy. Let's get started. So this is how it sounds without some effects. And this is how it sounds after mixing with the effects. Just turn all of this on. All right, so that's the track. I think I'll just write that solo from this region because it's pretty much the same all through. So we don't have any processing right now. Any processing we have is simply just for the tone of the sound, not really for mixing. So you can see none of the sounds are panned, none of the sound are compressed, just basic EQ and some stuff. So we're going to solo the kick, right click to solo the kick. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to do some EQ panning and some gain staging along the way. So the kick will always be in the center. And when we play the kick, so we're going to need an EQ to take out some muddy low end, right? And most times for kick, a rule of thumb is I usually cut below 30 to 40 hertz. High pass, right? So let's go about 30 hertz and see how it sounds. All right, that sounds fine. And if you want to make your kick sound round, right, you can just cut out a lot of the high to the mid frequency. And this is how it will sound. And if you want to make it sound punchy, just boost a notch at the mid frequency. Don't go crazy like this. So, but I rather want my kick to be round, not punchy. So I'm going to cut all of this out. All right, so now I have my kick. I'm going to leave the loudness at this level for now, and kicks always stay in the middle. So I'm going to come to the next most recurring element, which is my rim shots. And I already have an EQ here, but this EQ is mostly for tone, not really for mixing. So I will assume it's rendered, and now this I'm going to assume this is my first EQ on it. So I'm just going to take out a little bit of the mid frequency so that it doesn't sound too fat, because I have other layers. You can see I have a rim layer and some other percussions playing, and I want them to all stick together. So I'm just going to take out just a little bit in the mid frequency. If maybe this was the only sound, the only percussion, or the only rim shot I had, I'd have maybe just done a little boost here to make it sound a bit fatter. But since it's not, I just need to take out a little bit of frequency for other sounds that will come in. All right, so I'm going to pan this slightly to the left. Now, when it comes to rim shots, snares, or whatever sound you're going to use as your lead sound after your kick in terms of your drum, making drums, you pan them slightly to the left or right, but less than 10%, right? You can see right here around this corner, when I pan it, it's just about 6 or 7%, right? So now I'm going to come to my rim layer. So the rim layer is simply placed there almost or exactly the same sound as the initial rim shot, right? But only that it sounds a bit different in terms of character. So this is how it sounds on its own. And then this is how the original rim shot sound. Or this is how they sound together. All right, so now let's mix that, shall we? So we already have an EQ here loaded. Nothing has been done, but the original EQ is just for the tone, nothing for mixing. Let's listen and see how we can EQ this properly. So if I want it to sound brighter, right? I simply have to boost around 5k hertz right around here and just boost it a little around 2 to 3 dB. And if I want to sound dark, I can simply just cut it around 2 to 3 dB. So I'm just going to do a little bit of cut because I don't want it to be too harsh, because when we are going to do some grouping and adding some saturation and all of that, the drums are going to sound brighter. So I don't want it to sound too bright at this moment. So I want to create that room for it in the future. All right. So I'm going to pan it in opposite direction. Since this is a layer playing the same pattern, right? And there are similar elements, rim shots and the percussion layer, right? We just pan them in opposite direction for space. I'm going to pan it. It must not be 5%. It could even be up to 10%, right? Or 6% or 5% still if it sounds balanced in your ears. All right, I think I like that. So the next most recurring element, let's listen to this. So for Afrobeat percussions, I recommend you pan, let's say, between 10 to 15 or 20%. Depends on how far or much spread you want on your drum tracks. So I'm going to just take this to around, let's say, 15% for a start and just listen. Let me take it all the way to 20 and see. Then I'm going to EQ. When you pan, you don't want to EQ so much that it sounds weighted to one ear. At every point, it should sound balanced, right? When you pan, it shouldn't sound like a particular ear has more elements than the other. It should sound balanced, relatively balanced at every junction. And sometimes you need to adjust the loudness level of your elements so that it doesn't sound overly weighted in one ear, especially when you pan. You may need to adjust the volume to make it, to reduce it, or even to increase it sometimes. All right, let's go on to this element now. You can see this one sounds way off to the other ear, right? So I can maybe pan this right here and listen. I'm going to reduce the volume. I'm going to EQ this. So if you notice, right, you may be wondering why I did so much high cuts right here and so much low cut right here. Well, the bulk of the sound, that is the true tone of the sound, rests in this frequency range right here. So you may not notice much when I cut it all the way here, okay? So when you are trying to EQ, another thing you should know is that you don't want to change the true tone of the sound when mixing. You just want to take out unnecessary frequencies, okay? So if I were to do this, then that would be doing too much. I'm just going to cut enough high end and enough low end to preserve the bulk of the main frequency. I'm going to adjust the volume some more. This sounds good. Next, we have another percussion here. So for bass heavy percussions like this, you don't want to pan them too far to the left, far to the right. Most times, middle is recommended. It's best they stay in the middle most times. So I'm going to leave this in the middle and adjust the volume. Then I'm going to EQ. You see, that sounds really unnatural. So I'm going to take it back. Much better. Then I'll take, since there's nothing much going on in high end frequency, it's best to just clear it as well so that you leave room for other elements that exist in this frequency spectrum. And I increase the volume a little. Sounds good. Then next, let's listen to these elements. Same thing is to stay in the middle. Bass heavy elements or bass heavy percussions stay close or stay exactly at the middle. So I'm going to EQ this. Increase the volume a little. Then let's listen to the shaker. And then we EQ as well. So a lot of shakers tend to have really harsh high-end frequencies. So you may want to dent it a little so it doesn't sound too sharp in your ears. Let's pan our shaker, right? So a rule of thumb, right, when trying to level your sounds or trying to gain stage your sound is that your kick and your rim shot or your kick and your snare or clap are going to be the loudest relatively, right? You're going to be the loudest, while all other things are going to simply complement them. That is your percussions, your shaker loop, hi-hat, and rest. Or they're simply going to complement the other sounds. So that's why we started from the kick, then we started from the kick right here, then we moved on to this rim shot so that we can get that balance, and then every other thing else fall underneath it, okay? So do not always, because you see maybe this is loud, looks higher than the kick. That doesn't mean it's louder than the kick. Okay, the kick is still louder than the elements. So you trust your ears when you try to gain stage. All right. So for us to make our percussion sound even more interesting, that is our rim shot, or rather every sound aside from the kick drum, we're going to group them into a track so it sounds more interesting and have a different character that makes it pop through the mix, okay? So we're going to select all of this with Control and Shift to highlight all of them, and then highlight an empty track. You can see use SAT40. Then you right click, go to track routing. Then you create sub mix, okay? Then we name this perks group, okay? Then you can call, no need to color it, okay? But you can just color it if you like, but no need really. So yeah, it's going to overwrite all your color code you did initially, but so that it's easier for you to know which groups are which. Assuming you had maybe your vocals, your percussions, your snares, because sometimes a mix can be jam-packed, so color coding helps. So now let's listen to make sure it's passing through here. So let's turn it off if you can still hear our percussions. So you see we can't hear our percussions anymore, okay? So let's listen again. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to add saturation or a saturation plugin. You can use a distortion plugin slightly if you would like, but I rather use a saturation plugin, and for that I'll be using Fresh Air by Slate Digital. So we're just going to come here and then we're just going to listen to it. Brightness and depth to it. Let's see how it sounds. And also, when you add saturation plugin, it's natural that the tone or the feel of your percussion will change. Like for example, if you notice the shaker loop sounds a bit brighter, it sounds a bit more irritating to the ear, and we can also notice that these percussions lost some of their low end frequencies as well. So we're going to come right here and extend it a little bit. Also come right here, extend a little bit again for our low end percussions. Then for our shaker loop, we're going to come right here and dent it some more, and then we listen. Now we're going to also turn down the volume, okay? You can also turn down the volume from the plugin itself with the trim, but we're just going to use the fader right here. And let's turn down the volume of the kick a little, then we'll listen again. Let's turn down the loudness of the shaker, and then we'll listen again. All right, that sounds good. It sounds balanced. For now, we can always go back to adjust it later, but for now, it sounds good. So the last thing we're going to do, right, we're going to route our kick. We're going to deselect our kick from the master channel and route it to an empty track. Same thing with our percussion master, right? And then link it to this track as well. So let's listen. You see nothing is playing because nothing is selected. It's not going through the master channel anymore. But when I turn this on, you can hear it playing now. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename this and call it drum boss, okay? Because this is where our final drums are passing through both the percussions and everything. We can just color code this. I like to color code my projects because it makes things easier, especially when you're mixing a whole, because this is a project actually. So this is drum boss. And now that we have our drum boss, we're going to do some EQ to tone it some more, okay? Let's tone it some more, then we listen. Then the mid frequencies has a lot of the rim shots coming through. You can either turn down the loudness of the rim shot from here by selecting these. Or you can adjust it from here as well to make sure it's perfectly under control. All right, that sounds good for our EQ. And now we're going to also add a little bit of saturation, but not as a saturation plugin, but rather we're going to use a compressor that has an inbuilt saturator. So we're going to select this, going to come to shell. We're going to use CL. We can use the Wave CLA2A or CLA76. Let's use the CLA76 stereo, okay? And the reason I like this plugin is that it's so sharp, it makes it glues your drum together. So if you are familiar with Cytomix, the glue, this is the kind of compressor they use. It has the same function essentially. It's a very fast compressor. it makes things sound snappy and punchy. So let's listen and see. I've not touched anything. This is just the default plugin state. And how this compressor works, it works with the inputs, okay? So if I do all this all the way, for example, this is how it's going to sound. And if I do this all the way, this is how it's going to sound. When I drag it all the way down here, it's going to sound even more compressed, okay? So let's have it somewhere, let's say around 30 and see how it sounds. Let's take it down to here and see. Let's adjust the release and make the release, let's say around 7. And make the attack a bit slower. So I like this plugin a lot because it just glues, rather any compressor can do this, but the CLA76 also has a tone on its own that it makes your sound a bit more exciting. You can add a saturation plugin here if you'd like, but I think this is enough saturation. I may wonder why I didn't use reverb for my drums. You can use reverb if you like, but I like my drums most times dry. Then the sounds can have reverb, that is the melodies, the chords can have lots of reverb on them, but I like my drums sounding really dry. So if I want to add a reverb, I can just come to my percussions and add some reverb, but I prefer to have them dry. There's no real reason behind it. It's just a personal preference. I don't like adding reverb most times to my percussions or my drum tracks. I like having them really dry. So if you've been struggling with getting pro mixes, making better beats, recording vocals, I do offer one-on-one training. Yes, one-on-one training. And all you have to do is click the link in the description below that says one-on-one training. You fill a very simple form so I can help understand you better and what you need and how I can help you get there. So when you fill this form, I'm going to get back to you as soon as possible and we can get started on your journey to making much better music in no time. Trust me, it doesn't have to be a house. So making music doesn't have to be a house. You don't have to spend many endless hours on YouTube looking for tutorials. With just a very short time, within about 4 to 6 weeks, roughly within that range, I can get you to your goals in no time. Yes, with money back guaranteed. So don't forget to click the link in the description after you're done with this video to fill up a form, and I'm going to get back to you pronto.